I'm going to read to you, je vais vous lire deux petits morceaux et après je vais essayer de rester dans mes 15 minutes. Platforms. What is artificial ground? A constructed surface that functions as a new datum for daily life and that distributes what usually exists on the natural ground of our cities. In a dense urban context, all citizens aspire to have their own piece of land where they can have a garden and be in close proximity to the street and its everyday conveniences. But whereas true ground, i.e. earth, soil, has a thickness, a depth, artificial ground is by default relatively thin and needs to be thickened in order to function as the ground's surrogate. It could be filled with program that doesn't require facade, a supermarket, storage facilities, mechanical and ventilation systems, essential to deep spaces, over-engineered structural beams, etc. But then, what is our relationship to the ground when it doesn't coincide with ground level, streets, shops, transportation, the public realm that the 19th century and Walter Benjamin called the city, that place where citizens circulate freely. The modern movement distributed the conventional use of ground. Hilberseimer and Le Corbusier exaggerated the ground's capacity to serve as a layer for cars and all other services, and find a way to place elsewhere the ground that would satisfy all the other needs of modern hygiene. The roof then became a ground. This group of projects suggests that ground filled with a program in order to activate life in dense urban conditions must remain public and shared, even when elevated. Privacy exists only above this level, in private space and in a variety of housing types that reflect the various modes of urban living. Vive la dalle, but not any dalle. Platforms. Qu'est-ce qu'un sol artificiel? Une surface construite qui fonctionne comme un nouveau niveau de référence au quotidien et qui distribue tout ce que le sol naturel distribue en ville. Dans un contexte urbain dense, tous les citoyens aspirent à un morceau de terrain, un jardin proche de la rue et de ses commodités. Mais le vrai sol possède une épaisseur. Le sol artificiel, relativement fin, demande donc à être épaissi pour fonctionner comme son simulacre. Il peut être rempli avec des programmes qui n'ont pas besoin de façade, un supermarché, des lieux de stockage, ou encore des éléments techniques utiles mais mal vus, comme les gaines de ventilation, les poutres de structure, calculées trop larges, etc. Mais alors, que devient notre rapport au sol quand celui-ci ne coïncide pas vraiment avec le sol public, le niveau des rues, des boutiques et des transports, le domaine que le XIXe siècle et Walter Benjamin appelait la ville? Ce lieu où le citoyen circule librement, le mouvement moderne a bousculé l'usage conventionnel du sol. Hilberseimer et Le Corbusier ont exacerbé la capacité du sol à servir de niveau de circulation et de service pour trouver à placer ailleurs un sol qui satisfasse tous les impératifs de l'hygiène moderne. Le toit est devenu un sol. Big, heavy, beautiful. Eugène Hénard was not the same kind of futurist as Marinetti, but he helped us see the future for at least a few minutes in June 2007 when we won a competition to design a bus maintenance center with 180 public housing units and a daycare facility above it. The visionary section of the future street, or the La Rue Future, that Hénard had imagined would be realized. In Paris, the substream of the city, so the substratum of the city is extremely dense. The metro, RER, RATP, bus depot, the subterranean infrastructure of Les Halles, all occupy it. This functional density of underground Paris is as necessary to life of the city as the residential density of its noble buildings above ground. The basement level of the 14th arrondissement of Paris must have been extremely popular with sculptors who worked with plaster of Paris. It resembles a gigantic empty hole with tunnels and reservoirs running through it. In this area of the city, every new building must first consolidate the ground beneath it, as had to be done in 1932 for the construction of Le Corbusier's Pavilion Suisse at the Cité Universitaire. We are consolidating our ground with the underground levels that house the bus garage, parking, and other RATP maintenance services. The change to use public transport as the foundation of our building is extremely exciting. How can we superimpose Le Corbusier's 3 établissements humains, live, work, and leisure? Hénard n'était pas le même genre de futuriste que Marinetti, mais il nous a aidés à voir l'avenir pendant quelques minutes, au moins en juin 2007, quand nous avons gagné le concours pour ce centre au remisage de bus, 180 logements et une crèche. La coupe de Hénard pour la rue future se réalisait. À Paris, le sous-sol est très dense, le métro, le RER, les dépôts de la RATP, l'infrastructure souterraine des halles, cette densité fonctionnelle du Paris souterrain est aussi nécessaire à la vie de la ville que la densité résidentielle des bâtiments nobles et surface. Le sous-sol de 14e arrondissement a dû être très en vogue auprès des sculpteurs qui utilisent le plâtre de Paris. Il ressemble à un trou gigantesque et vide, parcouru de tunnels et de réservoirs. Dans ce quartier, chaque bâtiment doit d'abord consolider le sol, comme un peu plus loin et un peu avant le pavillon suisse lors de sa construction à la cité universitaire. Nous consolidons notre sol avec nos niveaux de remisage des bus, le parking et les services de maintenance de la RATP. L'idée d'utiliser le transport public comme fondation de notre bâtiment est extrêmement stimulante. Comment faire? Rencontrer les 3 établissements humains, travail, vie et loisirs, en les superposant. Maintenant, je fais ça. Donc, je finis là, 7 minutes, 8 minutes de mon temps. J'ai 7 encore. Si on revient sur ce que Sabri disait et ce qu'on disait depuis ce matin, c'est vrai que quand on pense des chiffres et des nombres et des numéros, tout est relatif. En même temps, si on prend la même base, c'est-à-dire Wikipédia, petit à petit, peut-être on peut commencer à comparer les choses. Donc on voit très très bien que la densité de ces 3 villes ne sont pas du tout pareilles. Même si on commence à dire que Manhattan c'est autre chose, mais quand même il faut savoir que la densité n'est pas forcément la densité verticale. Je me suis éloignée un petit peu de Paris, de Chicago et de Montréal pour aller un peu ailleurs. Les toits n'étaient pas toujours les toitures qu'on voit et qu'on pense et qu'on réfléchit après le modernisme. Donc en fait, la toiture était en plupart des cas, historiquement si on veut revenir vraiment en arrière, quelque chose qui était peut-être fonctionnel, mais cette fonctionnalité ne donnait pas une sorte de distance par rapport à l'esthétique, par rapport à la forme, par rapport à comment on utilisait, et donc la fonctionnalité d'usage aussi. Et j'étais très, très surprise, parce qu'avec la conférence géniale de Philippe, qui ne nous a pas montré cette image. J'attendais, et c'est pour ça que je suis allée tout de suite le chercher sur Google, en même temps que j'écoutais Philippe, qui a donné une conférence magistrale, et je le remercie. Mais en même temps, je pense qu'il y avait quelque chose qui manquait là. C'était la fonctionnalité de toiture qui vient après Le Corbusier, encore plus important, et c'est que le dessin de la toiture devient aussi la même chose que sa capacité d'évacuation. Donc ce dessin, ce n'est pas juste un dessin pour dessiner les petits plans de palais-congrès sur la toiture de palais-congrès de Lille, de Remcolas, mais c'est aussi pour arriver à créer des moments comment dire, de creux pour évacuer l'eau de la toiture. Are we still on the? Are we still sort of doing okay with the English speakers, or should I just? Okay, I was just saying that. I was very surprised that in that fantastic lecture of Philippe Simon, we didn't see the roof, which is one of the most important roofs of the 20th century, I think, which is the roof of the Congrès Expo, in terms of a superimposition of functionality with aesthetics and therefore with its form. And this superimposition of these three possible architectural moments come together in this, because the drawing or the dessin or the design of the roof is in fact where those places that water has to be evacuated become the drawing that you see in front of you. So this is going to be difficult, but I'm going to try to do it in the same time. But shall I go in English or shall I go, because they don't have, ils ont pas should I go in English? Is everybody okay with English? Okay. Je te fais un truc précis après. C'est en français, donc tu peux le lire. So when we started working on this project, the first thing that we did was to calculate, in fact, how much energy this roof was taking, but also how much it was giving. The roof of the building is on a site of 1.7 hectares, and the roof actually has a capacity of becoming a ground. So we turned it into a ground. But this ground wasn't only to make it into a green ground, but it was also to be able to give this ground the possibility of re-densifying this part of Paris in the same way that Sabri Bendimerad was talking about, and also Philippe were talking about, in terms of those places in Paris that have the possibility, without changing the regulation, to be changed. So if you think of the site, which is actually 1.76 hectares, which is just under 2 acres, I think, or just under half an acre, is, and then in terms of your scale, you can get it because it doesn't need to be, nothing needs to be said here. You have a sort of a aircraft carrier that fits diagonally onto the site, and therefore it would be the most fantastic possibility for us to actually see how we could reuse not only the surface of this thing, but also allow the surface to become the base of this. So knowing that we're going to have to fit something like about 180 buses of Paris to be parked under this site, which comes back to what I was talking about in terms of the density of Paris. And as you can see, the only place that the ground can be touched are on those black areas. Otherwise, everything else is basically occupied by the buses. We thought that we need to somehow compensate for this complete sort of taking over of the ground by creating another surface which would allow the sort of the usage of the soil to become something else. And therefore, because of all the Parisian impossibilities of regulations of superimposition, we're not in a city of superimposition like Manhattan or like in Chicago or like in Hong Kong. Superimpositions basically means different land ownerships in Paris, and therefore it is horizontal, but then with the horizontality we have to also have density. What we tried to do in a ground that they would not allow the public to enter was to see how we could actually work with the plantations which would be regenerating the soil as opposed to needing any kind of heavy maintenance. Therefore, the site in Paris becomes a garden on the roof of 180 bus depot, 180 places of a bus depot. At the same time, this garden is not allowed to be accessed by the inhabitants. So you can here see, I just wanted to show you that, for the past sort of 30 years that I've been teaching, most of my students or most of our students have been sort of showing us very, very thin roof structures that immediately can become very beautiful gardens. And therefore, I absolutely wanted to show you what it takes to make a roof garden. And what it takes to make a roof garden, but also what this takes to house 180 buses. It's not just for the roof garden, but it's also not the roof, but also the ground garden, but it's also the structure of our bus depot. So in order to be able to sit within the heights that are indeed needed for the buses, we also are creating a section which is quite interesting in terms of the irrigation of the garden, therefore the way that we're going to be watering it, but also the way that we are going to be evacuating the water. Here are some of the models that show the fantastic structure that we're gonna, that is reduced to its maximum of the minimum concrete that it actually needs. Therefore, we are maximizing the sort of to shrink the concrete as much as we need in order to also allow for the weight of the soil, which is going to be which is going to be consequential, in fact. And so you can see all of these sections that are at the moment put into place. We are going onto site hopefully within the next year or two. Projects take about, why is this repeating itself? Years and years in Paris. I think I'm within my 20 minutes. The roof grows from the ground. Monsieur Le Corbusier, how about le toit sol and not the toit terrasse? Thank you very much.
Bonjour, mes amis. Je m'appelle Michael, and I'm sorry, that's all I can do in French. So I apologize. But please, this is more of an intimate kind of crowd today, so if I say anything that you don't understand or that you'd like me to repeat, please interrupt me. I'm going to stay within the 20 minutes, and I think I can do that, even answer some questions. But today, this presentation is a little less esoteric and probably more boring because I'm going to talk about policy implementation, public policy in Chicago. And in particular, I'm going to talk about the incentives and policies that have led to the number of green roofs in Chicago. We're currently a global leader in the number of green roofs that we have, so I want just to talk a little bit about how we got there. And then I have a few slides on a new program that we're working on in Chicago to hopefully encourage more solar implementation in the city. And this picture is one of my favorites. It's actually the green roof on City Hall. And you can see that the building is, the city occupies half the building. The other side is the county administrative offices. And they have decided not to vegetate their side. But as I said yesterday, we're really happy about that because it's kind of provided this urban laboratory. And we've been able to do some monitoring, in particular in temperatures. And between the two rooftops on a 90-degree day, there's as much as an 8 difference between the two rooftops in Fahrenheit. So it's pretty significant. So the first, what I'd like to again start with are the public policy that we've implemented in Chicago since 2004. The most important policy was our sustainable development policy. We published it in 2004. And how it works is that if your project receives any form of assistance from the city, so whether it's financial assistance or if it's a project that exceeds a certain size in terms of acreage, number of units, height, then they have to go through a special process for review, and in the end they have to be approved by our city council. So any of those projects are subject to this regulation. And not only is it categorized by type of assistance, it's also categorized by the type of project. So the regulations for a residential project are different than those from institutional, industrial, or retail projects. And as an example, how this works is if it's a retail project that's large, so over 10,000 square feet,